This is the Powered Up Podcast, show 148.
I got into that role as 2022 Illinois Teacher of the Year because those kids have put me in a position that I am constantly reflecting on my practice. And because I want to do better for them, I want to do better by them.
Welcome to a real-world education with insight and advice from teachers in the game, where current and former educators reveal what truly sets apart the great teachers and what it takes to make a positive impact on students. Whether you're in pre-service learning, new to the game, or a seasoned veteran, this is the show for you. You'll leave feeling inspired to take action because we are powering education by empowering you.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Ken Erman, host of the Powered Up Podcast, and I am here with my co-host, Mr. Matt, the Parent Conference Man Rogers. Matt, parent conferences and jumping on for the podcast. One takeaway from your conferences tonight.
You know, this is not my first podcast after parent-teacher conferences. I was listening to an episode a while back. I was like, oh, look at you. You weren't tired of talking all day and then into the evening. I signed on with Ken to talk a little bit more. Pretty good stuff.
Well, it's the best part of your day, obviously.
Yeah, it is. You know, this is what I, wait all week for. Best thing, I will tell you, parent-teacher conferences looping led to the most comfortable conferences I've ever had. There are some challenges with looping. There are some challenges with new curriculum that I am navigating at this point. Now we're recording this in October, but I had so much more of a comfortable human conversation where I wasn't predicting that I knew your kid. I knew your kid. And we can talk really actively and very specifically. And I'm not there trying to get your satisfaction or your approval. I've already done that. So it was a really, really just enjoyable day. So that's how I'd reflect on it.
Awesome. How has your approach changed over your career for parent conferences?
I think I really focused on what I was sharing, and then I realized that what I'm sharing means nothing to parents. And I that's not to be disrespectful in any way. The parents care that they can trust me to be a professional. They care that their kid is going to be cared for, expected to grow and turn into a better version themselves, and that they can leave their worries related to school in my hands and not have to touch it. Oh, you've got it out of my hands. I'm moving away. I think that's the approach that I've changed, as opposed to I used to spend all this time. Oh, here's the norm testing data that compares them to all of these other. I'm just saying numbers, and it doesn't translate even if I give them a key. So we still do that by all means, but it's so much less dominating of the conversation.
Definitely. And so it actually relates a lot to our conversation we had with our guest tonight. She was fantastic. Kimberly Radostits. She's the 2022 Illinois Teacher of the Year. And we talk a lot about student growth. We talk a lot about programs. We talk a lot about data to build those programs and to build those student supports. Real quick, I will just say, show 44, Matt, we talked about parent-teacher conferences a long, long time ago. And show 39 was back to school night. So for our listeners, if you're interested in that topic, maybe scroll for a while to go back to those two shows. But like I said, Kim, she was fantastic tonight. I was sitting here in this conversation, and I was just in awe and had so much appreciation for her knowledge, for the way that she was speaking, the information that she was presenting to us, the conversations that she was bringing to our show. It was very obvious to me why she was a Teacher of the Year and a National Teacher of the Year finalist, because she is incredible. She's clearly very intelligent, very strong in her instructional practice, and is so focused on students and helping them grow and succeed. And it was the energy and the conversation was just really impactful.
One of the things that I was surprised is she's a Spanish teacher by trade. And again, I don't want to say anything that gets me in trouble, but when I think about my related arts teachers, I don't often assume that they are going to be such a pivotal member, like a core member. It is a option a lot of times. It is an avenue, but she has found a way to make that have such an impact on every student that she works with, whether they're interested in her subject or not. Just really cool to see influence and growth and impact come from every and any corner in a school. Very impressive stuff.
Definitely. I mean, if you remove any time where she specifically references the exact content that she was teaching and she only talks about the freshman program or supporting new teachers or the way she facilitates learning in her classroom, where she's not actually talking about like the Spanish language, you could listen to this podcast and think, and I could tell you, oh yeah, she's a history teacher. You say, oh yeah, that sounds right. No, she's a math teacher. Yeah, that sounds right. No, she's a science. Yeah, that sounds. I mean, the way she approaches teaching and learning, we've talked many times. Good teaching is good teaching, and I think she would be able to step into that role very easily. And now I know why her school district is encouraging her and trying to move her in a direction of instructional coaching, because it is very evident that she would be able to support teachers and have so much impact on them. So I want to stop talking amongst ourselves. I want to bring Kim into the show. So let's check in with Teach Better, and then we'll jump right into our conversation with Kimberly Radostits.
This podcast is a proud member of the Teach Better Podcast Network. Better today, better tomorrow, and the podcast to get you there. You can find out more at teachbetter.com/podcasts. Now let's get back to the episode.
Hi, Kim. Welcome to the Powered Up Podcast. How you doing tonight?
Great. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I'm really excited to jump into this conversation. So to kick things off for us, start nice and simple. Officially introduce yourself. Let us know where you are coming from and give us a snapshot of what your career in education has looked like.
Awesome. Okay, so my name is Kimberly Radostits. I am the 2022 Illinois Teacher of the Year, and I teach in a rural school district called Oregon CUSD 220, which is in the northwest part of the state. I am currently an 8th through 12th grade Spanish teacher. And in addition to teaching in the classroom, I also lead an after-school program that is designed to keep freshmen on track for four-year graduation, in addition to leading a new teacher academy for all new hires in our district. And so I've kind of taken on that leadership role in both of those and making sure that our freshmen have a smooth transition from 8th grade to 9th grade, but then also our new teachers have a smooth transition into our district.
What are two qualities in the way that you have prepared which I want to dive more into both of them to learn more about them, but I want to see if we can draw any type of parallels in the way that you design the freshman on track system and the new teacher academy system. Are there any parallels in how you approach that as both newbies, just in very different newbie worlds, and even in the way that you interact and establish rapport with the freshmen versus the new teachers?
Absolutely. I love this question. So I started with the freshman program. Started that 16 years ago. It's called Hawks Take Flight. We've had a lot of success with it, to the point where, like I said, we've run the program for 16 years. We've had hundreds of students run through it, and we've only had fewer than 10 not graduate in 4 years. So it has really increased the graduation rate in our school district, which has been phenomenal. But that is a community-based model in that we onboard the freshmen before the school year even starts. Over the summer, we really find out what is it about those students that they're passionate about, what are some things that they're nervous about coming into the new school year. And then we provide them with individual mentors that are planning to take them under their wing for the entire school year. So it's very, very community-based. We get together several times a week, and we become a little family throughout the school year that not only is something that's really beautiful and develops their freshman year, but they can continue to hang on to sophomore, junior, and senior year. New Teacher Academy is kind of the same idea. We onboard our teachers over the summer. Instead of doing that drinking from a fire hose method that some districts do just because of resources, in that, you give all of your new teachers all the information that they need over the summer, we continue that family. So all new teachers to our district are brought on in a cohort style, similar to Hawks Take Flight, actually. And they are also paired with a mentor, either myself or one from the elementary school, that provides them with the support that they need. And I say all the time that with Hawks Take Flight, the vision is for us to make sure that every single one of our freshmen are known and valued so that they have the skills and the supports that they need to be successful. The same is true of adults. Like, new teachers need all of those same things. They need to feel valued. They need to feel known. They need to feel as though there's a person in their corner that's going to help build them up in their weakest moments, but also celebrate them when they're doing things well. And so, to be quite honest, I think the reason why I'm passionate about both of those things is both of them are my jam. Like, they're both very, very similar. They're just with people that are in different, I guess, at different stages of their lives. But it's all, all a new beginning. And again, that feeling that we're all in it together. So it's been a beautiful thing to be a part of. Great question.
This is really not important. This is really not an important question at all, but I'm just really curious. Have you ever had a teacher that has gone through your New Teacher Academy that was a former student that went through the Hawks Take Flight?
So not yet, but I'm so excited about this because this year, one of the mentors in the Hawks Take Flight program is a former Hawks Take Flight mentee who I am mentoring, and he is in a college prep program right now to be a special education teacher, and I am so excited for him. He's going to be wonderful. In addition to him, I have two other students that were in Hawks Take Flight 4 years ago. They're seniors this year that are going into the profession. And I was able to take one of them with me to the White House earlier this year because I got an invitation from Dr. Biden as Illinois Teacher of the Year, and I was able to bring a guest. And so I got to take him with for a back to school event, which was really cool. Definitely a full circle moment.
Yeah, that is awesome. So with your new teachers, you mentioned that either you or an elementary teacher are a mentor to those teachers. And I think and maybe I'm wrong and I don't have a broad enough perspective of teaching across our country, but I think the mentorship model is relatively common. Teachers get hired and they're assigned with a mentor. But if I'm understanding it correctly, you are the mentor for every secondary teacher, and then there's one designated elementary teacher that's a mentor for every new elementary teacher. Is that correct?
Yes. And then the other piece that our academy has that other mentoring models don't always have is that what makes us an academy is that we do follow a cohort model, and we get together twice a month in our school district for professional development that is aligned to our district calendar. So for example, we got together last Wednesday night and we discussed what parent contacts look like because we're around parent conferences time of the school year. So we talked about how do you facilitate an effective parent-teacher conference, but then in addition to that, how do you keep that communication going? Like, you've met with the parents. Now, what are you going to do to continue to foster that relationship? And so throughout the school year, we're going to be meeting as a cohort of new teachers and myself and that elementary teacher, and really just building relationships with each other, having conversations during dinner. We usually eat dinner afterwards. But then, having some rich conversations around the things that we know are relevant to teachers in that time. So I guess in addition to parent-teacher conferences, if you're curious about what some of the other ones are, we do one on student learning objectives when that comes around. We do one on the Danielson model. We do one on special education when IEP season comes around, when you are reevaluating students so that they know what that process looks like, because a lot of teachers will get invited into those. We do one in February about how to motivate students that might be struggling a little bit, because that's usually when we start to see some of those behaviors in students in which they might be feeling a little less drive. And then we have several other topics throughout the year, but it's really hands-on. It's an opportunity for them to have conversations, and it's timely and relevant. And so again, instead of it being, we're going to give you all this information at the beginning of the school year, good luck, we're really dividing it out and giving it to them when it's needed in the moment, and allowing them a space where they can have conversations with other people that are experiencing the same things at the same time that they are. Which I do believe is a little different than mentorship, where it's usually just a mentor and a mentee. Now it's, a group of mentees getting together and having conversations. And now you can see, hey, I'm not the only one that's feeling this way. Or if I am, what are these other individuals doing that I can be doing more of?
Yeah, I think it is a little bit different. And in my district, and I think it's similar for most Pennsylvania, teachers have to go through what's called an official new teacher induction program, which is actually like a state certified program, to the point that I know that, like, if we have a teacher that moves into our district after teaching for 5 years, they would have gone through this official new teacher induction program and don't have to do the full thing with us. But what also I think is interesting is, from my perspective as an instructional coach, I think we have seen an improvement in our new teacher induction just because we didn't have coaches before. We're more heavily involved in that. But the mentor piece, what I find interesting is, in our district, and I think most that I've worked in and worked with are very similar, new Spanish teacher gets assigned to one of the foreign language teachers as a mentor, right? It's a little EDR stipend opportunity. New math teacher, they find a math teacher. New fifth grade teacher, it's probably the fourth grade teacher or the sixth grade teacher in that elementary school, or even their grade partner in fifth grade. And the value of that is you have someone that you can lean on that teaches your same content, teaches your same grade level. But I've always thought to myself, you're going to be collaborating with that person anyway, right? When you get a new teacher on your team, whether it be content or grade level, you are supporting them. That's part of being on a team. That's whether it's in teaching or anything else. You help the new people that are joining your squad. But there's so much to being a new teacher that if that particular teacher hasn't been a new teacher in a long time, or they haven't mentored a new teacher ever or in a long time, I feel like there's a lot of things they're not helping them with, right? Because they're not in that instructional coaching mindset. They're not in that, here's the 50 random things that you need to know how to do to survive your week or your day or your month or your year, that as teachers, we do second nature and we forget. Mm-hmm. And I love the idea of having that consistent mentor, like you're talking about, yourself or the elementary teacher. And like I said, as coaches now, we're doing more with new teachers throughout the year, embedded in the day, but it's still a little unofficial. And I like that idea of having consistent mentors working with the new teachers, regardless of their content area, because they will improve their skill set as that mentor in knowing what these new teachers need to really adjust to, being an employee and being a teacher of that district.
Well, Ken, just to add to that, we have a friend of the podcast that's been on. It was my former student teacher. And I remember sitting down with our university advisor, and she would say, naturally, there's going to be friction at some point, just because whether it's the idea of they're feeling bogged down by all that they have to do or any of these features, that there could be friction of, I'm doing a lot of this teaching work as a mentor to that student teacher. It's natural. Do not feel alarmed if that's something that happens. And I think, Ken, to your point, I have new teachers in my building that are the grade above, both in sixth grade. They're the only sixth grade teachers. My co-teacher and I are the only other teachers in the building that are partnered with them. We are naturally their mentors just by obligation. But one of the things that I appreciate is there are other mentors in the building that we are in the weeds with them already, as Ken, you were mentioning, to have another point of view, maybe not have the same stresses. As silly as it sounds, teaching can be oddly competitive. So sometimes it's difficult to feel like you're showing up someone. And I know that that's an outrageous thing to say, but someone who has beautiful classroom design for the first day of school, and you're sitting there with a barren classroom, that's intimidating. And you feel like you're off to a not even start, or you sit down for a data meeting and one's doing great and one's not. It's hard to not take that personally. So when you can take mentorship and maybe take away I know exactly what you're teaching, does this mean they teach it better than me type mentality, I think that's a valuable part that you're going to get even more growth out of that mentorship.
Yeah. The neat thing too about having done this for multiple years in a row is that sometimes we're able to address the elephant in the room just by saying like, hey, you haven't said this yet, but I've experienced with new teachers in the past that this is the time of year where teachers might be feeling like they're like you said, like they're really in the weeds, or, I've experienced with new teachers before that the first time that you see that your data isn't the way you want it to be, that it can really feel disappointing. And let's talk about how we can work through that, because it isn't a reflection on you, right? It's a reflection on where you and your students are in this moment. And here's some ideas on how we can get through this together. But it kind of helps kind of frame that a little bit and address, again, like that elephant in the room without it feeling like you're exposing somebody and what they consider to be weaknesses.
Definitely. So your freshman on track program, the Hawks Take Flight, you said you've been doing it for about 16 years.
Yes.
What was the spark to start at? Was there a clear need in your community to increase graduation rate and to support these students through that, and just kind of talk us through the dawn of that starting?
Yeah, so my very first year of teaching in our school district, towards the end of that year, I got called into the principal's office along with 5 of my colleagues to discuss the fact that at that point in the school year, our freshmen had accumulated 273 Fs for the year, 273 semester Fs, which might not seem like a big deal, except in this small town school, we had 130 students in that freshman class. So that was a lot of freshman Fs. And so he was calling us in to see if we would be thought partners with him in figuring out a way to support freshmen in the future, because obviously the things that we were doing weren't quite working. And so what we did at the time was we decided to start this little after school homework hub where we invited in 10 students that seemed to have been struggling that year and kind of took them under our wing. What we soon realized was that the 10 students didn't really need homework help. What they needed was an adult that was going to be in their corner and help them set goals and celebrate successes, and was going to be there with them along the way throughout the school year to, really kind of hold them to some of those goals. And so that following school year, we decided to do something a little bit different, where it was more of a mentorship model. And we asked the 8th grade team to give us a list of recommendations of students that were struggling in 8th grade that we can then pull into our freshman program. And that was a great way of doing it, except we found that in the second and the third year of the program, we were missing students that were kind of flying under the radar, those kids that are quiet in class that might not exhibit any behaviors that seem negative. And so those kids were kind of slipping. And so I, along with who is now our assistant superintendent, came up with an idea of building an early warning system where we took factors of the students that we had the 3 years before that, that were struggling, things like the number of Fs that they have in their classes, their number of missing assignments, their absences. We took information from the University of Chicago's consortium's research and built this early warning system so that we can identify the 15% of our 8th grade class that's struggling the most and onboard them into our program. And that's the way we've been doing it ever since. It's a lot more data driven. And as a result, we've built a program that's a lot more robust. We now have 7 mentors. I'm only one of them. We get together at least once a week, sometimes more than that. We're providing students with extra homework help. We're also partnering with their families and making sure that they're successful that way. And we were able to get the number of Fs in our freshman class down from 273 in 2007, 2008 to only 14 the year before the pandemic, which was truly beautiful. This last school year, again, we saw our numbers go way, way down. So it's working. And I believe that it's working because we are, yeah, I mean, you can see that it's working by the data, but I also just see that the confidence of those students just soar. And already, like, I'm starting to see that with this cohort. You know, they started off the year feeling very beaten down by the system. And, you know, I had one today, I had Hawks Take Flight right before I came here today. And I had one girl that's just, you know, was literally talking about dropping out of public school and being homeschooled 2 weeks into this school year to now coming in with this giant smile on her face, like, oh my gosh, I am passing all of my classes for the first time in 3 years. Like, she couldn't be more excited, and she sees herself as a kid that belongs in our school. And all that took was just a little bit of extra time from an adult, but it's that one-on-one attention that I think truly makes a difference. So that program, you know, again, in addition to that mentorship, there's a little PBIS system that's roped into it. But it's pretty low budget. I mean, the teachers do it out of the kindness of our hearts. It's not like we get an extra stipend or anything, but to be quite honest, I feel like being a part of it for as long as I have, it's made me feel like a very rich human being, because it's been a very beautiful thing to be a part of.
Well, and the reality is too, not only just what you said, you know, the great teachers, the good teachers, just wanting to help students. That's why we get into education. But two, I feel like you're going to see the benefit in your class when you
Yes.
have some of these students and they are more engaged, and they're obvious. I would venture to guess that their behaviors improve. There's less disruption. So there's going to be so many dividends in your class as well as your colleagues' classroom that only further helps the positive climate of the school. So I'm really fascinated by this. And go ahead, Matt.
Can I just add, you know, I think that's, especially at the grade levels that you deal with, the light bulb moments are more fleeting in those high school areas. So the idea of seeing success at that grade level seems to be something that, of course, your colleagues are willing to do it from the goodness of your own heart. That is the type of stuff that when you got into teaching, that's what you signed up for. So when you're able to see that more and more often, you know, that is a win, 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 win. I'll do it, you know, every single day, because it embodies so much of the value system as what we get there. I'm an elementary school teacher. I see a lot more light bulbs. I would still sign up if I knew it was actually going to lead to success. There's no question in my mind that educators across the country, you know, even half the success of what you experienced, it's absolutely worth it. And it also, again, goes back to the why behind we got into it. And, you know, PBIS or these other features, you know, completely fuel that soul, you know, feed that nature. And yeah, I just want to point out, like, sometimes we lose track of that. You made it seem so, you know, I don't want to say underwhelming, but like that was an incredible transformation. Like that is monumental in so many of your kids' lives, that totally changes the trajectory. That is so substantial.
The reason why we doubled down on that is the research shows that ninth grade is the make or break year for a student. If a student ends their ninth grade year with a D average, they have less than a 28% chance of graduating on time. So that meant that we had a big population of our school that was, you know, really struggling for a long time until we got this figured out. And now we've seen the results. We've seen that with that little extra nudge and that little extra support freshman year, these kids find that they have a sense of belonging and that they have an adult in their corner that they can continue to come back to sophomore, junior, and senior year. And it's really only a 1-year program. The idea is at the end of their year, they take flight. And we don't have them stay after school sophomore, junior, and senior year, but they know that they, you know, if they ever needed that support, there's those adults there for them. So once they're in there, they're for life.
They see a purpose. Yeah, once they see that purpose, they just explode and go for it. That's awesome. Sorry to interrupt you, Ken.
That's okay. And you know, one of the things I love about it is that the way you're utilizing data to do something so personal, right? And you know, relating it instructionally, I used data a lot in my classroom on a daily and weekly basis to constantly assess my students to see where they were at. so that I could provide personalized instruction. And so, yes, you're using data, but you're doing it to create such a personal, kind, student-centered experience for them. And that's where that data can create such a nice blend. And it's uh, it's so important to hear and so important for this to happen, because you referenced students that have been beaten down by the system. And as a fifth grade teacher, I taught only math for a while, and then towards the end I was teaching every subject, but math was definitely where I was strongest as a teacher. And I took my students feeling confident in math very seriously. And my goal was always for them to get rid of that math anxiety, regardless of how well they did in math, or especially for the students that really struggled with it. And it didn't matter to me if they came into fifth grade and they couldn't do double digit adding, something that they should have learned two years prior. I found ways to instructionally spend that time to fix and lay the foundation for them to be successful with that, because I didn't want it just to get passed to the next teacher, passed to the next teacher. And when you get to that secondary level, you have those students that don't seem engaged, that don't seem to care, that don't want to try. And I don't want to say it's easy, but it's very simple for a teacher to kind of accept that. And the student might have a less than positive experience in that one class, but it's happening in every single class of the day, right? And then when you think about, like you said, when they reach ninth grade and they've been exposed to this so long. So I'm curious, the way that you're targeting ninth grade, I think is really important. Has there been anything from this clearly very successful, long-standing program that has trickled down into 8th to 7th to 6th to start to target and support students to almost keep them out of your program?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's like you've made me think of 3 things that I want to talk about. But let me answer your question first. So the early warning system that we utilize in our school district, it was coded again by our assistant superintendent. He has it so that it is live 24/7. It's really cool. It's called Amos. He can build it for any school district that's interested in it. And if I were to click the button right now in Power School, I can filter the 9th grade class from the most at risk to the least at risk with the click of a button, and it's live 24/7. So anytime a teacher updates their grade book, it can refilter those students. We can now use.
Can I just ask a really quick question on that?
Mm-hmm.
So this Amos, does that a product that is compatible with Power School specifically, or is it
Power School and Skyward? Yep.
Okay.
It can be. And,
all right, thank you.
Yep. Mm-hmm. And other work, he creates other workbooks as well. But yes, it does work with those two. And it can be utilized at the junior high level. So we do use it very often in our grade level teams. We utilize that as a data point that we look at, like, who is it that's struggling right now? Amos is going to tell you that. And what's really cool about Amos is it tells you why is that student struggling. So are they in there because they have a ton of missing assignments right now? Is it because they've been to the nurse a million times in the last 2 weeks? We track nurse visits. Is it because, they haven't been at school? Is it because they bombed a test? Like, Amos is going to tell us about all of these off-track indicators, but then it also tells us some engagement factors as well. So every time a student turns in community service hours, that's like a plus for Amos. Or if a student has joined a new activity, that's a plus for Amos, because those engagement factors, right, really, like, we know students that are engaged in the school community and feel a sense of belonging are going to do better than students that don't feel that way. So we utilize that data for that reason. And the data, that was something else I wanted to bring up. We don't keep the data just to ourselves. We actually share the data with the kids. And I've done a lot of research on motivational theory since running this program. I find motivational theory to be super fascinating. I want to, do my best to motivate these individuals that kind of have a history of being unmotivated, quite frankly. And you touched on it, Ken, that a huge piece of that is confidence. I really love John Keller's research from the 80s on ARCS. That's an acronym that stands for attention, relevance, confidence, and satisfaction. I find that for so many of our ninth graders that are in that after school program, it's the confidence piece that they're lacking. And it's because in a lot of our systems, students are socially promoted, right? Because there's research to support that that's what we should be doing. So they're being socially promoted. But the unintended consequence of that is if you are a kid that has failed English every year since the 5th grade, and now you're in 9th grade English and you're reading Romeo and Juliet, you don't have the confidence that you could read Romeo and Juliet. And so for a lot of kids, they just throw their hands up in the air or put their head down and sleep because they don't think that they can do it because they weren't able to do English in 8th grade, 7th grade, 6th grade, and 5th grade, right? And so it's kind of a huge part of the work that we're doing is helping those teachers in that 9th grade class really break down their assignments into manageable chunks and providing students with the support that they need to build that momentum with that confidence. And you find that once you build that momentum with that confidence, they are motivated to do the next piece and the next piece and the next piece. And usually by now, it's like now we're in October, and they start seeing those data points. So like we look at their grades with them every single week. Every single week, there's a checklist that I go through with every single one of my mentees. The first thing on there is like, have you been to school every day this week? Like attendance. If the answer to that is yes, they get a little raffle ticket that then goes in a jar. We ask them, have you had any missing assignments this week? If you have, okay, let's talk about it. Let's look at this list of missing assignments. There are 6 of them this week. Okay, that seems overwhelming, but of these 6, like what are the 2 that are the most important that we want to get done by tomorrow? So we're really helping them prioritize those things. We celebrate if they got a grade of C or higher on a test. Like that's something I want to celebrate. I want that kid to know that they are having success somewhere, right? In case they're not feeling that. We talk about goals that we had created the week before. So like I have a student right now who's passing all of her classes with a C or higher, and she's so excited about that. But that doesn't mean we just, take a break until next week. It's like, no, we're going to set a goal that next week you're going to retake this algebra exam because even though you're at a C+, you really could be at a B-, and let's shoot for that. Like, why not? Why wouldn't we be doing that? And I find that utilizing that data really does bring them together where they can see their progress. It becomes very, very visual if we're going back to that every single week. And to be truthful, as a teacher, that motivates me too. Looking at that data and seeing the progress of my students motivates me. Especially as a Spanish teacher, if I go from day 1 where my students know hola, ¿cómo estás? And now we're in October and my students are writing incomplete sentences about their schedule. I'm like, yes, we have learned something. Like that is visible progress that I can see. And I'm going to make every single student in my room pause and take in that they did that as individuals and we should celebrate that. So a lot of thoughts there, but I definitely think you're on something with those questions.
Yeah, and I want to piggyback on what you said about keeping the students informed with the data. When I started to use more data markers, and it was really just simple, like automatically grading Google Forms and other online tools that did that, so I could see at the end of the day between classes like how were they doing, and then reassess who needs what support or who needs to be challenged where. When I started revealing the data to the students as they were doing those assignments and explaining to them what it meant and what it should tell them. And, when it comes to test day, like you shouldn't be surprised. I shouldn't be surprised by how you do on this test. The students definitely bought in more, and it definitely made a huge impact on their motivation, on their willingness to try, on asking for support, because when they saw it, they realized they needed support. Students asking to try things again because they thought they could do better than what, they just received on that quick check. Keeping them informed, I think, is so important, and being, and like you've referenced, being very explicit with them. Like, this is why it's important. This is what the data means. This is what you can do about it. This is how you can reflect on it. All of those are so important because we're just trying to create skills for them to succeed in any facet, not just succeeding in the game of school, right? It's about succeeding in life. So you referenced your Spanish classroom, and we've talked so much about your academies, which are so valuable. Now you've been involved in this freshman academy since really your first year. So it's not like you can compare it to when you were teaching before, but just in general, how do you think your involvement has specifically adjusted, changed, or impacted your style of instruction in the classroom that you probably would not think about as a teacher if you were not so heavily involved in this student support program?
It is not fluff for me to say I would not be the 2022 Illinois Teacher of the Year if it wasn't for the kids in my after school program. I got to where I got into that role as 2022 Illinois Teacher of the Year because those kids have put me in a position that I am constantly reflecting on my practice. And because I want to do better for them, I want to do better by them, I have done a lot of research. And so ARCS in particular has completely transformed the way I teach. I utilize ARCS as a framework for my lesson planning in that every single class period, like the research states, you have to have at least one of those 4 factors in order for a student to be motivated towards the work that's in front of them, or really for a human to be motivated for whatever task that's in front of them. So every class period, I think about that, like, okay, as I'm lesson planning, how am I going to hook the attention of my students in this lesson? Is it going to be simply that it's something that's relevant to their lives, or do I need something a little flashier than that? Because the truth is, sometimes like today we did subject pronouns. I'm going to be honest, subject pronouns is not going to catch, like that's not going to feel very relevant to any teenager, right? So I had to do something that was going to catch their attention. So we played some type of game, right? So that, with competition to get them going on that. I really am mindful about scaffolding in my class, building that confidence specifically in the Spanish class. I think that's really, really important. So every single class period, we start with, some low risk activities. And as the period goes on, we build on that. So for example, let's say we're learning about body parts. We'll start off a class period where I'll throw up a slide of Dora the Explorer and I'll talk about all of Dora the Explorer's, different body parts. I'm having students repeat after me the different words. And then from there, we do a little activity where I will call out a word in Spanish and they show me what I'm talking about, kind of Simon Says like. And then from there, I will describe an alien in Spanish. So we bring in some numbers. I'll describe an alien and they have to draw on their paper the alien that I'm describing. So this alien has 3 heads and 6 eyes. They're listening to this rich, comprehensible input, drawing what it is that I'm saying, showing off their silly drawings, which always get a laugh, right? And then from there, they're able to draw their own alien that they're now describing to a peer. So we're starting off with things that are very low risk, building that confidence, building that trust with each other. And then at the end, now we're really performance-based. Now we can do this thing because we've built our way up to that. And that isn't the way I was teaching in the beginning. I started doing that because I watched my Hawks Take Flight kids and their attitude towards school and realizing that for so many of them, if I were to start with you're going to draw an alien and describe it to a peer, they'd be in total shutdown mode. There's no way that they would believe that they could do that. But if we can baby step them up there, they're more willing to take those risks. And I do that not only with lesson plans on the day-to-day, but then those lesson plans within the unit also build, right? So you might go from that to, I don't know, sounds like the silliest assignment ever, but maybe we're doing something where they're leaving me a voicemail where they had a UFO sighting and they want me to know about this UFO. And so they're going to record themselves, leaving a voicemail in Spanish and Schoology so that I can listen to that and really assess it as a summative later on. So the answer to that is that, yes, those kids are a huge part of my story. I couldn't be more grateful for them.
I guess it's just hearing some of the considerations of just creative ways to get a simple task that really drives students' attention. The last one just sticks out to me, like leave a voicemail, alien sighting, what a wildly, it goes back to prompting being so important. And that's where the creative juices come into. We often talk about intrinsic motivation. Where are we getting the kids motivated? And to get my 10-year-olds motivated is different strategies than getting yours. If I tried to launch that same activity with my 10-year-olds, there's not a chance that I'm getting very productive work out of them. But your age kids can handle this creativity and say, this is a fun way to think about it. I often think, entrance essays into college I remember there was is it University of Chicago used to have these outrageous essays that students would have to respond to that were non-academic, like they were not the traditional way to respond, and you were seeking for outside the box, but kind of on your toes, realistic uses of the academia. And so it feels very similar that you use this as a leverage point to say, this is a wild way to do it, but let's all have a little bit of fun. It's still going to be rich in content, but it's going to be a little wacky as well. And that's where you kind of build in the built-in level of fun, and keeps you on your toes, keeps you enjoying it too.
So I'm looking at John Keller's arcs. I have an article that I want to read when we're finished here. Maybe tomorrow. It's kind of late, but looking at, so it's attention, relevance, confidence, and satisfaction. Um, and so the confidence is the piece that's jumping out to me right now. I don't think teachers would be shocked to learn about the attention and relevance. Not to say that that's something that comes easy. That's something that takes a lot of work and craft and thought in the way we approach lesson planning and designing those experiences for students to hit those two. But the confidence piece I referenced earlier, obviously, is something I'm very passionate about. And one of my strategies for building confidence is raising the bar, moving the field goal. Creating an experience where the students really have to struggle productively through that experience, something that was typically probably, uh, lack of a better term, spoon fed to them, right? Giving them the resources, giving them the information, giving them whatever they need, and saying, you have the ability to look at this information and solve this problem. Look at this information and apply your knowledge. And I found that the scaffolding, I found that the scaffolding was easier to recognize when you created that experience without any scaffolding in place. So I'm working with an environmental science teacher, and we're looking at how to get the students right into the activities right away, maybe before any lecturing. And my recommendation for one of the activities we're going to try, I said, we're going to have as little planned as possible when it comes to scaffolding supports for these students, because we're going to see where they need it. If you over scaffold, then you don't realize where they didn't need it, right? So what are some of your strategies to build their confidence where you're not shattering those students that have already been shattered, but also moving the field goal where their level of confidence rises beyond what you maybe thought was really possible for what they were confident in academically? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally makes sense. I utilize reading for that. So I utilize reading prompts. I like to write a lot of silly stories for my students. I try to make it as engaging as possible by making the students in my classroom the characters for my different stories. And I always make sure that in those reading prompts, there's a lot of vocabulary and grammar tenses that we haven't learned yet, but I want them to figure out what is going on in that text by using some visuals. So we do a lot of, I guess I don't know what the strategy is. I call it, I don't even have a name for it. But what I do often is I'll write a story, and then I'll take a baggie, like a plastic baggie, and I will cut up pictures that are related to that story, and I put it in the bag, and I make sure that there are multiple characters in the story, and the students have to take those pictures and group them up based on the characters that they're reading about. And then they have to explain to me why they've given each of those characters the pictures that they gave them, right? So again, it's like it is throwing them out there in that it's definitely not always going to be all information that they've learned. But they are making connections based off of the material that we've done in the past. And then they have to be able to explain why that was their choice. And I always tell them there's more than one right answer, right? And more than one way to getting to an answer. And so I love hearing their thought process with that. And then from there, I'm always able to say, okay, well, you were able to read this type of prompt. Now that you've read one, why don't you try writing one of your own and like extend it, be creative, get out there and try it out. Usually on the same theme, just because I teach Spanish 1 primarily. So it's not like they're going to be able to write about environmental science if we're on a school subject unit. But they certainly do seem to really go after that and give it a try, which is fun.
Well, to compare it directly to what you referenced earlier about where you felt you had to build their confidence towards the activity, the first one you described was the end game was them drawing their own alien and describing it to a peer in Spanish for them to try to replicate that drawing. And you talked about that being a very vulnerable experience for the students because it's really a one-on-one interaction. If they're not confident in the vocab, the language, or just confident in being a part of that classroom, that's a really, really stressful experience for them. As opposed to what you just described is a collaborative experience out of the gate, right? They're figuring out these pictures together. You're not isolating the students individually. And so that's a perfect opportunity, like you said, to just throw them out there and see what they can do because they're doing it with safety in numbers, right? And so I think it's really important to highlight that difference in when you're trying to do this with students. How are you taking into account how they're going to feel in that experience in the way they're interacting with their peers?
Absolutely. Yeah, and it's fun to watch the Hawks Take Flight students do that for each other too, right? So because after school they're working on all of their subjects, all in that after school time together, but they're super supportive of each other as well. And you find that they group themselves up based on what kind of homework needs to get done. And you see these students that, again, might not have been confident with school in the past, now coaching and supporting and celebrating each other. How cool is that to watch that family grow? It's, like I said, it's a beautiful thing to be a part of.
How have you seen, and I know you mentioned you don't do it necessarily alone, you have other colleagues that you're working with through this. How have you seen it change the culture from the adult side of your school? And obviously, we talked about how with success, you're probably, it's a better place to be. But how have you seen whether that's creativity out of coworkers or just general the demeanor of your building because of the institution of this great program? And I know most of your experience has always been through this program, all but a year. But have you noticed changes or just that freedom to try and dream and consider and adjust? How has that played into what we teachers often deal with the frustrations of teaching?
I think that a big thing that's come out of this is that the teachers in the program have gotten really, really close too. So that creativity comes forth within that. Not only do we see the kids collaborating with each other, but we're collaborating with each other a lot more as teachers, right? And so we're noticing that certain individuals might be struggling or pockets of individuals are struggling. And we're having some really rich conversations that are very student-centered and cross-curricular and allows us to kind of streamline some of those expectations so that it's not just one teacher expecting, students to do whatever activity it is that we're doing it in multiple class periods. And so that collaboration piece is something that's definitely been strengthened through that program. And I find that not just myself, but all my other colleagues as well have really grown as a result of working with those students after school. And then again, just having conversations. So after Hawks Take Flight, obviously we do it after school. All the teachers are able to leave too. And yet we find ourselves spending at least a half an hour to maybe 45 minutes to an hour after Hawks Take Flight, just having conversations about what's going on in our classrooms. And then the kids that are in that program and how we can better communicate with their families. So I've definitely seen a lot of growth out of every single one of our team members. And I'm grateful for them because I think that we motivate each other to give the best version of ourselves every single day.
How is that, to pair off what Matt was saying, how has that impacted beyond the team, just your school overall in teachers' attitudes, willingness, empathy to really focus on getting that 273 down to 14, down to 0, and maintaining, for the teachers that never see freshmen, that never teach freshmen, the teachers that are only working with juniors or seniors, that mentality and that attitude and that positivity remaining through the high school experience.
Yeah, so as a result of Hawks Take Flight, we started a freshman team. So we actually have a common plan period, the individuals that are in this program. And because of the success that we had, our school district is now, as of 2020, every single teacher is on a grade level team. So it used to be that at the high school level, we started to silo ourselves again, where Spanish was with Spanish and English was with English and math was with math. Now we're way more student-centered as a building. That's trickled up to sophomore, juniors, and seniors, where those teachers are having conversations with each other once a week as well. So it has had an impact on the entire building, and that everybody is doing something similar. They just don't have the after-school mentorship component, but they are having those conversations with each other about instructional strategies that are working in their classrooms and brainstorming different ideas for different individuals. And we're having conversations from one grade level to the other. So, the 9th grade team is meeting with the 8th grade team. We're seeing, a more seamless transition there, but now the 9th grade team also can go and report out to the 10th grade team and so forth. So we're finding that all of our students are feeling a lot more supported because they have teachers that know what's going on in their lives before, like I said, before they even walk in the building, which is pretty neat.
I think that model is definitely much more popular in middle schools, right? The 5th through 8th-ish, depending on what middle school looks like, where you are. Just out of curiosity, logistically, how does that work with teachers that, say, teach pre-calculus that could have sophomores, juniors, seniors, and those content areas where it's more by student skill set? Do they still have those mixed classes, but they're more just focused on a particular grade level because the course they teach would typically have more of that grade level? How does that work logistically?
Yeah, so that's what happens. Whatever grade level they have the most of is the one that they go to. They're allowed to visit other grade level teams, obviously, if they need to. And they still have their content level teams too. So they get a little bit of everything, I guess. We're a small enough school that, you end up having usually like the majority of a group. So I also teach 8th graders. I also teach juniors and I teach seniors, but because I lead that after school program and I have 3 classes of freshmen, that's where I land, and same with other teachers as well. So it's just the majority group. Yeah. Good question.
Occasionally we ask this question in a segment that is just related to a specific lesson of where would you like to see it grow? Where would you like it to see it go? And sometimes we often feel like, oh boy, we took it to the ends of where we can take it. I can't imagine where else I would go. Whether you want to talk about the program or instruction, where do you think could be the next steps to continue or drive it even further? It sounds like it is already robust, but are there considerations of what that next step could look like?
I mean, gosh, if there were more hours of the day, I would love to have a sophomore program. We've talked about that. we've also talked about maybe starting a senior one, because we find that some of these kiddos sometimes lose a little steam towards the end. So that would be an extension that I think would be of value and something that I would love to see and love to support if possible. In terms of instruction, I just set this goal for myself just last week, and that is with my 3-4s, my Spanish 3-4s. That confidence speech is huge, and being comfortable is so important. And I find that my 3s and my 4s will often revert back to speaking in English, answering questions in English, even though they know the answer in Spanish. And so that's like, where can I take this next? I can take this to a spot where they're like spontaneously speaking Spanish as often as possible. But that's going to take a lot more work and a lot more of us getting comfortable with each other in order for that to happen. But it's a goal that I'm excited about, and I'm going to, I guess, continue to arc my way there if possible.
I don't want to.
Go ahead, Matt.
Sorry, I don't want to criticize or have any challenge, but I want to kind of see. I totally understand adding a sophomore, junior, senior program. I guess, is there anything within the program as is that you like? I understand that that the confines being challenging. Are there any things about what is currently in place that you would like to drive even further or expand upon?
I see what your question is. Yes, I would love to do some more college and career exploration so that students can get the opportunity to see what kinds of options are available for them outside of high school. We don't quite get there. We very much focus on the now and a 1 week at a time kind of attitude. There were a couple of years where I was able to get grant money that did allow us to do that, where we were able to do some college visits. We were able to go and do some site exploration and then some field trips. But I have not secured a grant in the last couple of years, I'll be honest. So kind of running on snacks and prizes out of my personal budget. And so that isn't a thing for this year, but definitely a possibility for in the future. And I can see how that would be super valuable because it would give students that, that vision of what they might want to do after high school and really maybe, again, make school a little bit more relevant for them and give them an idea of where, what kind of classes they want to really dive into for a pathway in the future. Because if you haven't seen it, it's hard to be it, right? So I would definitely like to build on that. So yes, thank you for asking me to clarify that.
Something that I think would be interesting with building that program in the sophomore, junior, seniors would be how student mentorship and student leadership could be part of your solution to time, leaning less on teachers and more on students, especially seniors supporting sophomores, right? Teachers get them started, and then looking at seniors that have gone through the Hawks program or seniors that have just found success, maybe not the ones that, academically have been successful since first grade, but the ones that have through grit and through perseverance have found their way to be successful in school, leading that program. And I've been running through our show list to try to remember who it was, and I think I know who it was, but I'm not going to mention the name, so I'll connect with you afterwards. We had a guest on who did a lot, and Matt, if you remember, let me know, who did a lot with student leadership, and to the point where a lot of their school discipline was handled through student leadership programs. And when they were having like behavioral problems, they were meeting with student restorative practices groups and going through a process like that. And I just think it would be so interesting to see how the students could become a big part of that extension program with the future grade levels.
Yeah, I love that idea. And I see the potential of them being able to do that, specifically because, the sophomores, juniors, and seniors that have been through it, I often see them encouraging the current freshmen to make sure that they attend, right? Because it's an extra hour of their day. And let's be honest, sometimes a 14-year-old will try to escape. It happens sometimes. I'm not going to pretend it doesn't. But it's nice when they're caught by an upperclassman that have been through it to be like, hey, this isn't something that you want to be skipping. Make sure you're there. And as a result, with their support, our attendance is actually pretty good. It very rarely happens, but it does every once in a while. And it's nice to have that extra, like you said, student leadership there. So yeah, maybe bringing them in a more formal way could be a really neat thing to try out in the future.
There's a running joke that Ken tries to allocate all the responsibility to kids so that he has as minimal responsibility as possible. And he hides that under the Danielson model of just good teaching practice. So
there you go.
It's part of the model, and I was always advanced in it. So I would love to continue this conversation. I have thoroughly enjoyed this, but I want to be cognizant of our time and jump into our exit ticket, which is the same 4 questions we ask every guest every week. So question number 1, what is the best thing a teacher can do to make a student's school experience better?
Take the time to get to know them and develop a strong relationship. Yeah. And if you can extend that into their family, that's an even greater thing right there. And that's why we see so much success with Hawks Take Flight, is those families are a huge partner in their students' education. And so making those parents feel comfortable and feel like they're welcome and that they're valued, that's the next level, I think.
So what's the best piece of advice you've ever received? And it could have come from a colleague, a supervisor, or even a student.
I would say that the best advice I have gotten has come from PJ Capozzi, and it's that idea of staying unfinished, and that every day you need to go into your room trying to be a better version of yourself, better than your former version of yourself. And you hear a lot of times that comparison is the thief of joy, but if you're comparing yourself to yourself, I think that can be a really healthy thing. And so though I have admittedly accomplished a lot of things here in the last couple of years, I'm not done. I've got so much more in me, and being unfinished, I think, gives me the grace to keep after my goals. And on those days where I feel like, I've had a misstep, it's okay. I'm not there yet, but I can keep working at it. And so that concept in and of itself has been one that's really driven me to give my students my best each and every day, and give myself my best, and really invest in my personal growth and my professional growth so that I can serve my students better.
Love it. In relation to grace, because sometimes we can't always give 101%, we know that the school year goes in waves. There are days, possibly weeks, that we are struggling just to survive. What's something you feel like every educator needs to hear to help power up through those moments of struggle?
If we were to compare ourselves to the versions of us that were in our classrooms of February of 2020, I keep saying this, we would see that so many of the issues in education have stayed the same, but we have grown. We are stronger, and we've proven time and time again that we are capable of amazing things. When that pandemic hit, you saw teachers across the globe coaching and supporting each other and rooting for one another, right? And figuring it out together. On those days where things are rough, lean on the colleague next door. Be an open door teacher. Be an avid traveler of your schools. That, I think, is where the true motivation comes from, and the great ideas. When I feel like I'm down on myself, I give myself, again, the grace and the permission to go and visit another teacher and see what kinds of things are happening in their room, so that maybe I can get inspired, again, to try something different in my own. Or maybe it'll reaffirm that, hey, what's going on in my room right now is really just okay. It's a sign of the times. It's a phase that we're going to get through, right? But just having some rich conversations with the people next door, I think, is the way to get yourself through that. As a profession, we're a fellowship, and we're a strong fellowship. And I think that we often forget that, whether it be, like you said, Matt, because of competition or whatever else. But man, some of the best professional development I've ever gotten has been at the water fountain or in the teacher's lounge, or on my way to the cafeteria when I bump into that crazy choir teacher down the hall, right? Where they have great ideas. And so just connecting with your colleagues, I think, is the way to get through that. I think the way you get through tough times is through community. And I see that, right? Not only in my classroom, but in my after school programs and with the profession, just in general.
I love that. So the last question, it's easy to fall into facilitating a repetitive classroom. What do you think separates the teachers who are the ones constantly seeking to change, innovate, and adopt new teaching strategies?
I think that we're all passionate about different things, right? Whether it be that you are feeling passionate about your content area, whether it be that you're feeling passionate about the students in your classroom and their personal growth, whether it be you just having a passion for the profession. I think on any given day, if you're feeling uninspired, if you tap into one of those three types of passions, you can find yourself through that rut and find yourself motivated and inspired to try something new. And again, I think that a great way of making sure that you're doing that on a consistent basis, and to be less of I don't know if you're kind of describing like a filing cabinet teacher, is by making sure that you're having consistent conversations with colleagues next door and having consistent conversations about the things that are happening in your room, so that you kind of have an accountability partner of some sort, right? And you have something exciting to talk about with that colleague, and some successes to share out. And maybe that could be a place that you could seek advice too. Because you're right. I think it is comfortable sometimes to rely on some of those old things, but it's pretty fun and exciting when you can try out some new ones, and just being vulnerable with the kids and saying, hey, we're in this together. We're trying this out. Never done this before, but I'd like to live and learn and alongside you. You find that a lot of kids are really into that.
As Ken mentioned, this conversation's been great, and we keep on going, but to be respectful of your time, what is the best way for our audience to stay up to date with you and your experiences in the classroom and your work in education, whether that's through social media or a website, if you don't mind sharing that with us?
Yeah, so you'll find me on X at Srtarad, Srtarad. And on that website, you will find my contact information. Feel free to reach out at any time. But yeah, I share pretty regularly about the different things that I'm up to. And I love sharing out about Freshmen on Track. So if you want to build a system in your school district, I'd love to be a thought partner with you on that. Same with New Teacher Academy. If you'd like to see what a calendar looks like in our district, I'd love to be a thought partner with you on that. So just thanks for the opportunity and thanks for listening.
Yeah, absolutely. I plan on, when this comes out, sending it right to some of our key stakeholders in our high school to really look into this Freshmen on Track program, because I found that really fascinating. I think what you're doing is really great. I also love that you just said X for your
Sorry, I don't know. What do they call it now?
I think it's great. I think it's great. Is it our X handle? Is it our, how do we?
I have
no idea. Just say handle? Does everybody know?
I don't know. I don't like that it says repost.
Are we Xing? Right? Are we Xing it out? Like when you're instead of tweeting out, there's a lot of language we have to establish, and you still have to come up with it. If you get on another podcast, you better have a name for that character bag strategy. You got to brand that strategy that you shared with us.
Yeah.
So Kim, seriously, thank you so much for coming on. I really, really enjoyed this conversation. I think you offered us so much. Absolutely.
And can I tell you something
instructionally,
really quick?
You offered us so much. Please.
I just wanted to tell you that one of the things that I've been doing in my 1 hour of instructional coaching that we talked about, Ken, is every other week I send out a newsletter that I call Teacher Talk. And part of that is a podcast pick. And you guys have been the podcast pick twice this school year already. I don't remember. I cannot tell you off the top of my head because it's late what the podcasts were, but I definitely included you guys in there. And I had some colleagues that were like, yeah, that was a really interesting listen. I just encourage them to listen to it on like their plan period or something. So hopefully you guys get some more, I don't know, subscribers. Is that what that's called? Yeah. So yeah, thanks for the work that you're doing.
Thank you so much for
important.
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing that out. I appreciate it. And as you listen, or any of your colleagues listen, if they have any feedback, please send it to us, because we're always trying to improve our craft as much as we can. So seriously, thank you so much. I look forward to staying in contact with you on X and as we continue on our educational journeys. And Matt, why don't you take us on out of here?
All right. As we power down this episode, Kim, you have definitely left us feeling powered up. Thank you for the time. And to our listeners, we look forward to our conversation next week with another great member. So stay well, stay healthy, and we'll talk to you then.
Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. If you haven't already, please subscribe on whichever platform you're listening to or watching us on YouTube. Each week, we get to talk to amazing educators who are making a positive impact on the lives of students, their colleagues, administrators, and education as a whole. It's been such a privilege every week to be able to talk to these incredible individuals, learn from them, grow with them, and better myself and all of education through these conversations. If you haven't already, please consider sharing this with a colleague, someone who can benefit and be powered up from the experience of listening to these incredible conversations. Because of Powered Up, we are powering education by empowering you.